In this channel, we've been responsible for seeing all kinds of theories, from animated series to real life stuff. And if there's one thing I really enjoy, it's digging around the internet to bring you the coolest and most unknown conspiracies I come across, mainly from Reddit, if I'm being honest. Now, with the interesting boom that DreamWorks movies have had since the success of Puss in Boots 2, and all the love you have given to the Madagascar theories, I decided to keep researching to make more videos on that side. Starting with something strange I found when I was working on one of my most insane videos to date, the one where I revealed that Mort ate his granny and is an interdimensional alien. It turns out that, for no apparent explanation or reason, in an episode of All Hail King Julian, Puss in Boots appears, and not just once but several times, and no one is surprised that there is a Spanish-speaking cat in the jungle of Madagascar. And yes, All Hail King Julian is a weird series, but this is another level because it tells us directly that the universe of Shrek and Madagascar are the same, which seems impossible because Madagascar takes place in a world very similar to ours, but with talking animals and penguins with military weaponry, while Shrek is a world of fairy tales and magic and giant diva cookies and dronkies everywhere. So I did some research. There are many theories, and I found several mentions of a multiversal theory, because in the DreamWorks series this is a theme that pops up from time to time, but today's video isn't about that. Today's video is about the unknown and insane but very interesting DreamWorks theory, a theory that connects all the DreamWorks movies as if they were the story of a gigantic universe, similar to the Pixar theory, but with a 400% increase in penguins with military weaponry. There's only one way this could start, right? The earliest point in our line is the Crudes, where we see the origin of life on this world. This is the shortest chapter of all, as it only takes care to expose that the planet is similar to our own, having similar continents where movies like Madagascar or Kung Fu Panda will eventually happen. But there's also a much more subtle change, which will take relevance as the video progresses, because we see that the animals prove to be much more conscious than their real counterparts. The Crudes show us the origin of the human species that would grow to become the dominant species. But not by much. Humans would eventually follow a similar path to ours, arriving in Europe, where years later the saga of How to Train Your Dragon would take place in Scandinavia. Here we see dragons, the prehistoric animal evolutions we see in the Crudes, and their relationship with an early human civilization. Obviously, with humans traveling from continent to continent, we would eventually arrive in America, specifically North America, which is where Shrek takes place. Probably. I mean, very very far away is clearly Hollywood, and in Shrek 2, Shrek is asked if he comes from Europe. There's also a very good theory that Shrek takes place in Elfham, the mythical fairyland of English mythology, but the fact is that it's a faraway land, most likely North America, showing the evolution of a faraway place in the same world we saw in How to Train Your Dragon. Now this may sound like something completely far-fetched, until we take in some interesting ideas. For example, in the first tape of How to Train Your Dragon, the trolls and gnomes are referenced, which could even be primitive versions or even the same ones we see in Trolls. Gnomes and trolls are magical creatures that are normal in the world of Shrek. But perhaps the strongest clue that this occurs in similar worlds is the dragon from Shrek, as the hidden world in the third installment of How to Train Your Dragon is based on the Atlantic Ocean. Apart from the fact that it is revealed to us that most of the dragons traveled to the east, which corresponds with the mostly Nordic evolution of these creatures, while a small number of these reached the west, that is North America, where the dragoness would be a very rare species, and exactly the kind of creature that would become a legend. Now here's a detail that Reddit user Sobosocks uses to explain a lot of the weird stuff that doesn't seem to connect to each other, like Kung Fu Panda, which features a China filled exclusively with talking animals, magical attacks, a completely different religion with its own heaven and hell. And again, furries, lots of furries. This concept is continental magic, explaining that magic is a concept that exists but manifests itself in different ways, from simpler things like letting animals talk, or in more powerful ways, like the chi that the dragon warrior uses, or even the entire world where Shrek and Puss in Boots inhabit. This is how, for example, a completely human society like the Crudes are the only thinking beings in Africa, while in North America, intelligent species coexist, or in China animals are the dominant species. But this diversity will not last long, as soon one species will rise above the others. With humanity growing technologically, it gradually begins to see itself as a more attractive species, especially those interplanetary entities more advanced than us. Yes, we are talking about an era that begins with Monsters vs. Aliens, which introduces us to the missing link, for example, a strange green being that might as well have been frozen during the time when magical beings dominated North America. It also introduces the quantonium, the strange mineral that fell to Earth and turned our protagonist into a giant white-haired creature. And it is very interesting that a mineral that transforms living beings, and that can be found in asteroids, is introduced, especially because in the context of the DreamWorks theory, it is fuel for another very insane theory, because taking into account the history of our planet, we could even be facing a world where dinosaurs never became extinct, but that the meteorite that hit was quantonium, and that its impact created more colorful versions of animals, such as those seen in the Crudes, or simply ended up endowing several with different abilities that others might perceive as magical. Maybe it's pure speculation, but it's definitely interesting and surprisingly convenient. Monsters vs. Aliens leaves us with one last connection to the DreamWorks theory, with its villain Galaxar and his strange relationship with another character. Megamind, as always, is a movie full of mysteries. What is the origin of the superheroes? What species is Megamind? Did Music Man achieve success with his life as an artist, or did he not sell a single album? Those are mysteries we may talk about in the future. For now, let's focus on a rather interesting point, and that is that the movie doesn't explain why nobody is afraid of a blue guy with a gigantic head, just as if someone like that had already come before. Someone like Galaxar, who also failed in his mission, which explains why civilians aren't terrified of him and why he was left in a baby prison, which would technically make Monsters vs. Aliens a kind of prequel to Megamind. Our last point here is the home movie, final proof that, well, there are aliens now. When we consider all of this, the story still feels coherent, but that's because we haven't gotten to the part where it gets weird yet. You see, there are certain movies that seem to share a particular theme, and if you arrange them a certain way, again they seem to be telling us a story. But it's one of those things that if I say out loud, I start to sound like a complete loon. So I ask you to please keep an open mind while I try to say this. My second big problem with this theory has to do with these two, Wallace and Grommet. I mean, like any normal person, I love this duo. But considering they have a movie with DreamWorks, things get pretty complex for us. Considering the shared universe, it would mean that everything Wallace and Grommet have done is canon. Which also means that Megamind, the Crudes, and the Madagascar animals were running around while these guys were going into space. Which doesn't seem to be correct. Especially if we accept that the plot of the movie is Wallace turning into a huge giant furry. And add in all the awesomely weird stuff that happens in these movies. I mean, originally Wallace and Grommet isn't even from DreamWorks, so we could write them off completely. But surprisingly, they support this chapter of the theory very well. Through Wallace and Grommet, we get to see the evolution of animals within this world, becoming more and more conscious and intelligent, as is clearly the case with Grommet, and it takes us into the general DreamWorks universe. We see various species communicating intelligently and managing their own society in ants, and we see animals creating a larger society even among other species in Over the Hedge. What is most interesting is to see how this evolves, moving into huge complex populations in Shark Tale or Flushed Away, and showing that these animals are again approaching the level they were in ancient China. As if this magic is being reborn in a world that long ago forgot it. And perhaps the most important point of this whole chapter is B-movie. And no, I'm not exaggerating, during this part of the story, animals finally communicate with humans verbally, getting to the point where a bee was given legal rights. We had a very strange trial that turned into a TITANIC president for animal rights, and there are even several animals and insects that become members of society. With the mosquito being the Saul Goodman of this universe. Which would finally answer one of the most important questions in the entire DreamWorks universe. Why did they allow a snail to race in Formula 1? I can't be the only person who still thinks that. Well, it turns out that it's because in this world animals have human qualities. That's why in Madagascar 3 nobody thought it was weird to see a circus completely run by animals. And then we would get to the culmination of all this, where we see a puppy that learned to think like a human, bringing back the imagination of the people with his inventions. Which we add to other movies, such as a baby who talks and runs his own company, or a teacher who became a superhero overnight. It seems that the magic the world was missing is slowly coming back. Right now we are seeing a new magical dawn in DreamWorks films, with several of them showing this idea of monsters appearing in front of the real world, such as in Abominable, where a Yeti must return to live in China, in a land that we knew had a strong magical presence and has now been conquered by humans. Perhaps the furthest point in the timeline we have so far is the bad guys, where the coexistence between humans and animals has reached such an advanced level that we can see them together even in the most mundane activities without anyone saying anything, showing us how far this world has advanced. Now, the most interesting thing, and something that has the potential to close this theory with a flourish, is the upcoming release of Ruby Gillman Teenage Kraken, which could finally show us the moment when modern humans discover the magical creatures they have chased away for years and now live among them. Maybe even finding a middle ground where they can all coexist as they did at the beginning of time with ogres and dragons, and finally bring magic back to this world that long ago wished it back. All of this could give a beautiful ending to the theory, a story of a magical world finally returning to what it always should have been. But since we can't have nice things, there is still one huge detail that could answer something everyone has been wondering about since the beginning of the video. Mimiman, how did Puss in Boots end up in All Hail King Julian? If you've seen my videos, you should be well aware that at DreamWorks they are weird. Very weird. A clear proof being that video where I talk about Mort, the Viva King Julian series, and all the weird stuff they loaded on our favorite feet-loving lemur. So we could explain away the Puss in Boots in that series by saying it's weird and that's it, but they always have a justification for what they do, and this is no exception. In the episode Too Many Cats, which is the 5th episode of the 5th season of another series, known as The Adventures of Puss in Boots, Puss proceeds to meet alternate versions of himself, which come thanks to a spell, which sounds similar to something that happened in All Hail King Julian. Thanks to this, the most logical explanation is that it is not a time-traveling Puss in Boots, the one who ended up in Madagascar, or that Madagascar and Shrek occur in the same era, but that it is an alternate version of this cat. And yes, we already knew that, but this ultra confirms the existence of a multiverse. Which also opens the door that, if there is something you don't like, we could say that it happens in another universe. But this overcomplicates things, damages the beautiful story we've told today, and brings back the horrible migraine that started when I saw the Wallace and Grommet thing. Now, do I seriously believe that all the writers and producers at DreamWorks have planned a shared universe from day one, and that every little detail has been put in place to reveal to us a hidden narrative in this Kraken Girl movie? No, of course not. But it's one of the most interesting theories I've read in a while. There's no doubt about that. And it's long overdue for someone to talk about all this. Oh, so I hope you liked this video. Like it if you did. Subscribe for more videos like this, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.